As I think about it myself, I think about our ministry as deacons and priests and bishops. Because John Maxwell, I don't know if you're familiar with that name, John Maxwell, he writes books on leadership, and if you Google him, you're going to find dozens upon dozens of books.
Very good ones.
Good books too. So last year, my husband Anthony and I traveled to Orlando to hear John Maxwell speak. I'm part of this organization called the John Maxwell Team. So we went to hear him speak, and it was fun to hear him speak, but every time he speaks, he always cites at least one maxim. He says, if you think that you're a leader, sitting down for this one, if you think that you're a leader, but no one's following, you're just taking a walk, he's famous for saying. Right? Because, let's be honest, we're human beings, we like to think well of ourselves and all. And here he is popping our balloon. If you think you're a leader, but you don't have any followers, you're just taking a walk. I've tended to transfer that to a maxim in the church that I say, if you think that you're shepherding or ministering to others, but there are no others, if you think that you're shepherding but there are no sheep, then you're just out standing in the pasture. In my estimation, in the Independent Catholic Church, we have many outstanding bishops and priests and deacons, perhaps less outstanding deacons and priests and bishops, ministers of the people of God. In the ancient church, it would have been unthinkable for there to have been a shepherd without a sheep. But in the Independent Catholic tradition, we have this incredible, tremendous working of the Spirit where, because we share the Spirit so freely, we have directories filled with hundreds of names of bishops who may have a handful of priests, but the number of laity and all who are involved, we just have to ask, are they really thinking deeply about what it is that they could be doing as servants in the church? If I think that I'm a leader, or if I think I'm a shepherd, but there's no one following, if there are no sheep, then am I simply out standing in the pasture? The ancient church had flocks over which the church appointed various shepherds. That was the model for bishops, for overseers. In the ancient mind, God was very distinct from us. Before we came into an era of panentheism, God is in us and we are in God, we used to believe that there was God and that there was us and that we needed someone to connect us. Who connected us to God and God to us? That was the job of the priest. The priest was the mediator between God and the people. Suddenly what happens if the people are no part of that equation? The priest in the Old Testament was the one who connected people to God and God to the people. The deacon, we know the deacon's role in the scriptures. The deacon's role was one of service. Service, it implies that you're serving other persons. Literally the table waiters, they were helping other people. There was that relationship. There was that service to other people. And so I look for inspiration in things like the scriptures. And the way that I read it, the Mathian Jesus according to Matthew, the Mathian Jesus gives us the words in Matthew 18:20, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. What? Here I am. If there are 2 or 3 people gathered in my name, this sort of rubs us in different ways, only because, I don't know about you, but I grew up in an era of private masses, right? It was a remnant of the pre-Vatican II church, where we build all sorts of churches with private altars because it would just be me and Jesus celebrating my Mass alone at my private altar in the church. Vatican II comes along and says, wait a minute, what are we doing here? What are we doing? There's no such thing as a private Mass. With whom are you breaking bread and sharing a cup in a private Mass? Spiritual communion. I don't want to dismiss the value of spiritual communion, because we know that in places where we find ourselves, often it's a matter of spiritual communion and being in communion with others. But at the same time, the ancient church was less about spiritual communion. It was more about us coming together and sharing bread and wine in remembrance of Jesus. It was about community. So since September, what I've been thinking about has been this notion of what have we done here in Austin, and is there something that we can learn about this from this experience, sort of for the larger experience of independent Catholicism? Because what we did here in Austin, as Archbishop Johnson pointed out last night, was we started with a small group of people. Literally, it was 19 people the first Sunday. We had 2 masses, one in English and one in Spanish. It was 10 people at one mass, 9 people in another, gathering in my living room at our former rectory, literally just coming together and literally breaking bread. At that time, we weren't using hosts. We were literally breaking bread and sharing a cup of wine in Jesus' memory. We were praying the way Catholics pray, but trying to follow in Jesus' footsteps. We believe. We went from ground zero to what it is that you'll be seeing on Sunday when our community gathers. Last night was just a foretaste with a very small group of people who on a Thursday night were thinking about things like getting kids to school in the morning. It'll be interesting to see what happens tonight. Tonight we'll be competing against football, but at the same time we do have a drum circle. Drum circle or football, it may be tempting to some, we'll see. But Sunday's the day, especially here at Holy Family, when people take a break from what they're doing and come to church. And a lot of it's not just coming to church to fulfill an obligation to check it off and say, I went to church. A lot of what you'll see on Sunday is people who know one another and have entered into a relationship. They get to look forward to coming to a place where everybody knows your name. Right? And so what we've been thinking through, what I've been thinking through especially, is how to help in the independent Catholic tradition. As I've gotten the lay of the land in these 5 years, I've seen lots of people with all sorts of titles, investments, and I see the photos on Facebook, but I don't always see the photos of the community. So my question becomes, how can I or we here in Austin help to share a bit of our experience of growing to be able to provide some sort of theoretical framework for Eucharistic communities? And that's not to dismiss any other ministry that we do as deacons or priests, as bishops in the independent Catholic tradition, because those are important. But at the same time, if we continue to do the same things, we should expect the same results. We've heard that before. Insanity is thinking that we can do the same things and expect different results. If we do the same things, sisters, brothers, do the same things, we should expect the same results. I simply am raising the question, what if we in independent Catholicism were to propose doing something different? And I think that something different simply goes back to that scriptural idea of gathering with others to break bread and share a cup of wine in Jesus' memory.